out.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell. Here we are on a Friday in midnight in Europe. And she joins us, Gauri Khandekar from FRIDE, FRIDE, which is a think tank organization in Madrid and also in Brussels. She joins us by Skype from Brussels. Hi, Gauri.
Hi, Jay.
Thank you so much for staying up late for us.
My pleasure, and I would like to wish you and all your listeners a very happy Easter and a happy Passover.
Thank you so much. So the first Seder is tonight, so we're going to be celebrating that only in a few hours. So I wanted to call this show Tough Analysis of the Iran Deal. Not that we'll talk only about the Iran deal, but people here are talking largely about the Iran deal. We've had a number of shows here in ThinkTech about it. People weighing in. Yesterday we had an ambassador who weighed in on the Iran deal, and we also had an Iranian teacher from Manoa weigh in on the Iran deal. And as I drove in just now, Marco Werman on National Public Radio was talking to a number of people on the Iran deal. And it's really important that we understand the Iran deal because, as I suggested before the show began, the Iran deal somehow, maybe you can enlighten me on this, somehow it changes things. What happened here changes things. First, can I ask you, what are people saying and thinking about the Iran deal in Europe in general?
Yeah, well, the Iranian nuclear crisis has been quite a major foreign policy priority for the EU, and it's mainly in Europe. It's been seen as the EU leading the negotiations, which is not the case, of course. But there is the presence of the EU foreign policy chief. Before it was Lady Ashton, now it's Mogherini. But it's been seen as a very crucial phase, let's say, in international politics, especially from Europe's point of view. And it was imperative to have such a deal. And given the pressure from Netanyahu, who's traveled to most European capitals, who's pressured the Europeans to get Iran to stop its perceived nuclear enrichment program and the path towards nuclear weapons. So it's very serious in Europe. So it's been high.
Yeah. So you say that the Europeans in general, and I guess you measure that by the press and by people talk about, feel that the deal with Iran is, quote, imperative, end quote. Why? Why do they feel that way?
Well, it's just being seen as very keen for regional stability. Yeah? Israel stands at a very important foreign policy angle for the European Union. I mean, it's a country to which Europe feels it has a certain responsibility. So ensuring that Israeli security is maintained was really top priority, and they basically don't trust Iran. And what they saw was if Iranians got a nuclear weapon, the Saudis would get one too, and then it would just everybody would join the bandwagon in the region. And the region, the Middle East, which is already a very turbulent region, would become, I think, out of hand.
Yes. Well, what about you said a minute ago that Netanyahu had been visiting various leaders in Europe to try to lobby against the deal, and I guess he was unsuccessful in that regard. How do people view him?
I think there's been a growing dislike for him, especially when it comes to the events after Charlie Hebdo. Of course, they had no reason to kind of question his urgency in terms of the Iranian nuclear crisis, but I think Israel-Europe relations are at a low point at the moment because of two reasons. Because Netanyahu has traveled to Europe and he's asked many of the Jewish community to come back to Israel where they would be safer. That's one issue. The second issue is because some European countries, led by Sweden, have bestowed recognition upon a Palestinian state, and that's creating another sore point in relations between Israel and the European Union.
Something happened at The Hague recently, too. I think it was the International Criminal Court, where the Palestinians were permitted to join it. Do you know about that?
No, I'm not really following that.
Okay, that happened only within the last day or so. The other thing that was interesting, I might mention to you and see whether it fits, is that this morning in Iran, a paramilitary commander went on record to say that Israel must be destroyed, and that the survival of Israel, the existence of Israel, or rather the non-existence of Israel, was a, quote, non-negotiable item, end quote. Netanyahu, in his remarks about the agreement, the nuclear agreement, said that he wanted the final form of the agreement, which is not going to happen, if at all, until June. This is a temporary agreement, Then that agreement in June should include a provision to the effect that Iran recognizes the existence of Israel, because up till now, Iran has not recognized the existence of Israel. And apparently there are people, including people in authority, who feel that Israel, even now, even with this agreement, feel that Israel should be destroyed.
Yeah, I think, these statements are really not going to go anywhere, honestly. To be very honest, I don't think Iran would do anything to actually destroy Israel. Yes, I think that would be suicide. And that would not happen. I mean, of course, there are many people who are saying things like that, and even leaders, even the last Iranian president said that. So I think it's just venting frustration, and there's nothing that they can really follow through with these empty threats, let's say. Asking for Israel to ask Iran to recognize Israel in this deal, I think is going a bit too far. Not because Iran should not recognize Israel, but I just think that negotiations on getting Iran to cut down its production and really move towards almost giving up its program is asking quite a lot. I think so I think it would be wiser to go step by step rather than a very utopic deal.
Yes. Okay. Well, I have more questions for you. I think I know the answers in some cases, but I'd like to ask you, what is the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia? You mentioned that if the Iranians were able to develop a bomb, then soon enough, so would Saudi Arabia have a bomb. Is Saudi Arabia, well, I guess Saudi Arabia and Iran don't get along, but is Saudi Arabia also trying to develop nuclear weapons?
Well, there are some there's some evidence that Saudi Arabia is. Saudi Arabia just recently, last year in 2014, it became the world's largest importer of arms. And that's saying quite a lot. Iran and Saudi Arabia have a very difficult relationship, mainly because of the different sects of Islam that they follow. So Iran is mainly Shia and Saudi Arabia is Sunni, and they don't really get along at all. And I think Saudi Arabia would be just as bitter an opponent as Israel for Iran, perhaps. Both countries are looking for regional hegemony in the Middle East, and at the moment, as we speak, Saudi Arabia has been leading airstrikes in Yemen, which is pseudo-controlled by Iran. Iran has been fueling the discord in Yemen and the clashes that have been going on now, the political tensions. And Saudi Arabia has struck Yemeni sites in order to push back the Shia rebellion.
Yes, Iran has been a bad boy. Iran in 1979 held the American embassy and all its employees hostage for months, as I recall, and took some real chances with diplomacy going forward with its relationship with the United States. And during Omina Badabadajad, that was very hard on Iran's relationships around the world. And, you wonder whether Iran is out of that period, out of the period of holding embassy officials hostage and out of the period of threatening everyone around, every power on the planet being a real rogue. Had you believe that Iran has somehow turned the corner as a country, not only in terms of how the people feel, but about how their government works? Do we have a new Iran coming out of this?
Jay, I honestly think that Iran is one of the most misunderstood countries. Iran is really the people of Iran have kind of been held hostage with this Islamic revolution. Not most of the country shares this religious extremist views that the political leaders tend to kind of rally around. And the basic person in Iran, the youth in particular, they really like Western culture, American culture. You must have seen those the few youth that did a version of the Happy song by Will Ferrell, and they got sent to jail for that. But the people in Iran, the common man, is quite liberal in terms of other Islamic countries. I think the danger to Western societies, liberal democracies, comes more at the moment from Sunni Islam than Shia Islam or the Persian culture that Iran has. Iranians, for example, are not going to fight jihad with ISIS, and most of the fighters come from Arab countries or from the Sunni sects. So I think that Iran has largely been misunderstood in that sense, and it's quite the way it has Iran and Iranian officials are coming to the table, even though they have to be pressured with sanctions, they are coming and negotiating. It's not a lawless country, I think, and it's engaging the world. I just think that the country after the Shah of Persia, during the Shah's time, the Persian Shah's time, Tehran was one of the fashion capitals. And then it just went down with the Islamic Revolution. I still think that the people embody those liberal values that the Shah of Persia had tried to spread. And yeah, I think it's a much better country in the region than most others.
Yes, well, I get a disconnect on it. I interviewed a young, actually he wasn't so young, but in his 30s, a lawyer out of Tehran at the law school. He was in the LLM program not too long ago. And he was a real gentleman, very likable guy. You wanted to spend time with him. And the story was that he had left Iran, and even at risk to his family, because the government was threatening to him. He was concerned. And so he went to live, interestingly enough, in Syria, where he went into business there and was successful. But just to say that he was a very civilized guy, a very likable guy, and there are people like that from Iran. At the same time, you have this sort of bad boy thing going on, and one of the guys who testified, or who rather spoke with Marco Werman this morning, was an American official in Washington who actually supports the treaty, or rather the agreement, the nuclear agreement, and at the same time who has for years opposed a nuclear Iran, but he feels as a practical matter it's the right thing to do. But when Marco asked him, what is the relationship between the U.S. and Iran going forward, he said, well, in some ways they are allied, for example, in fighting ISIS, but in other ways they are longtime enemies, and this is the U.S. and Iran he's talking about, and they will remain longtime enemies. Do you agree with him?
I don't think that they would remain long-time enemies. Of course, there's a lot of truth in what he says. But I think that Iran is really misunderstood, and once the kind of Islamic Revolution umbrella is removed, I think it would be really even a friend to Israel. If you remember, I think it was in the 60s or the 70s that Israel helped Iran actually to start its nuclear program, and even Germany. It was Israel and Germany, and then things changed. I just wanted to give you a personal example as well. My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, is Iranian, and his members of his family were kidnapped and tortured by the regime now, and they were kept in jail for quite a long time, and now they've been set free, and one of them is actually pursuing filmmaking course in at New York University, and the other is in Norway. So,
but neither of them is in Iran.
my brother-in-law lives in India. He studied in India.
Okay.
But I mean, what we get to know from him as well. I mean, even the last elections, he's like, well, there are two devils that we have to choose from. You know, they don't have a good choice for who would represent them. So the people's voice is not being really heard. And there are a few that, you know, they keep power amongst themselves. Of course, Khomeini and his, you know, team really have an iron grip on the country. And until they leave, I don't think Iran would really fulfill its potential as a real engaging partner.
Well, do you think that the U.S. Will be the relations with the U.S. will be normalized? That in the years to come, maybe not in this administration, but maybe the next, that we will find a way to have a healthy relationship with Iran, and that we can count on Iran as an ally, even in a very discombobulated Middle East?
Yes, I certainly think so. I think, you know, President Obama has made such good steps. Every Nowruz, I see him speak to the Iranian public, and I think he also knows, you know, that the public is very different from the regime. So I really think so that Iran is more an ally to the West in the region than a foe. And especially when it comes to the fight against jihad and ISIS, where Iran really does not share the same views as the Sunni Muslims of the region. And this also actually has a bearing on stability of Afghanistan. Because Iran, like India, wants a very stable Afghanistan for the region in terms of trafficking as well of drugs, humans, and Saudi Arabia, and in terms with also Pakistan is pushing for instability in Afghanistan as well. And I think you can see the differences there, you know.
I want one more point, and then we'll move on to you know, the next part of our discussion, Gauri. There was an article in a publication called Washington Times yesterday, which is known to be a conservative periodical in Washington, by a fellow who writes for them on a regular basis. And there's a long article for the proposition that what we really have here is a country, Iran, that wants to do nuclear weapons, that we shouldn't abuse ourselves into thinking that their determination to have nuclear material is for energy only, because they have oil anyway, and that they're really looking for nuclear weapons. They're looking for hegemony around the area, the region, and that what we really have here, and I'd be interested in your reaction. I think I know what it would be. What we really have here is Chamberlain in 1938, was it? In Munich, where he made his famous speech about implementing an appeasement policy to allow Adolf Hitler whatever he wanted in order to avoid a confrontation in Europe, which turned out to be, you know, a historical mistake of major magnitude. Could it be possible? Would you allow for the possibility that what we might really have here is another appeasement policy?
No, I mean, honestly, I think, okay, Iran may have wanted nuclear weapons. You can't really control that to that extent. And, you know, when so many countries have that possibility of acquiring this technology, you know, the Pakistani scientist, Khan, he was the one who had passed on this technology to Saudi Arabia and to North Korea even. And I think nuclear proliferation is the main issue. Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and most of its, it was used as a breeding ground for terrorism, the training grounds as well, and most of the U.S. sources have confirmed that as well. I don't think it can be compared to Hitler and the situation, honestly. that's taking it a bit too far, because like Iran does not have that influence.
I just wonder,
across the world.
you rightly point out that we are having proliferation now, and nobody can deny that we have more countries holding more nuclear, or at least the possibility of nuclear weapons than we did before, even during the Cold War. And I think we all have to watch this very carefully going forward to make sure that we don't have a tinderbox, a la World War I, where everybody had a draconian plan, and one day all the plans were put into action, and before you know it, we had a war based on plans that did not necessarily relate to the reality, but the plans had a life of their own. And I think we all have to watch out for that.
For this moment, we're going into a good direction. The agreement is at least there.
Okay. Let's go to the second topic. And because of the time, I don't think we'll take any breaks. We'll go straight to the second topic, and that is German wings. What a great tragedy. What is the reaction in Europe? Although, we live in a global village now, and we know in large part in the U.S. how people feel in Europe. And if it's news in Europe, it's news in the U.S. And likewise, if it's news in the U.S., it's news in Europe. But can you give me a feeling for how people are reacting on the street?
Everybody was shocked. Everybody was literally shocked at what happened. Nobody would have imagined that, this pilot or this co-pilot, the junior pilots wanted to suicide,
Mm-hmm.
And it has really left everybody shocked. I mean, bewildered almost. And first, actually, you had on Twitter many of European Muslims saying, "I really hope it's not a Muslim,"
Yeah.
And that's the how do you say, the feeling here, Oh no, it might be another attack, and tensions have already increased, and then it was ruled out that it's not a terrorist attack, but it's been one of the most horrific attacks. Horrific incidents have happened in Europe of recent, It just seems like misfortune, like heavy misfortune, but really, really sad. And you could see it, the next day when some passengers took the same route to fly from Barcelona to Hamburg on German wings. The pilot, the main captain of the plane, he came out and he actually hugged everyone. And he gave a speech standing in the cabin saying that I also have a family and I would like to go to have dinner with them. So he said that, and that really reassured people. And, it's everybody got a fear of flying suddenly again, It's huge tragedy. And apparently the pilot, Lubitz, he had researched how to lock the cabin, the descent, and he accelerated when the plane was going down. So it's
So it's very sad, very sad. But what it points up is, the very security that the world put in place on commercial airliners to prevent 9/11 was used in a funny way to create this crash. The very cabin door security that was supposed to prevent, terrorism, wound up protecting the suicidal pilot.
Yeah, actually, what the U.S. has in place is this rule that there will always be two people in the cockpit. So if the captain or the pilot wants to use the bathroom, one of the stewards comes and, accompanies the other. And this rule was not followed in Europe. It's obligatory across the US, but not in Europe. And that was the mistake, actually. So leaving one person in charge was the main mistake. And now laws have been put in place that there will always be two people in the cockpit. Yeah. And that's the main change you see after this attack.
Yeah. Well, that theoretically anyway, that should stop this from happening, or make it more difficult for a pilot to commit suicide. And I guess the other aspect is we cannot afford to have pilots that are not psychologically healthy. And
That is
there
true.
must be a better way to make sure that our pilots are not suicidal.
That is true. But you know what? The medical safety and the medical, how do you say it, anonymity rule prevented doctors from going to Lubitz's employers, which was Lufthansa and Germanwings. They could not, because of medical secrecy rules, they could not openly say that, you know, he has these issues, and he didn't have to disclose them either. And actually, on the day that he was supposed to fly, he had gotten doctor's notes asking him to stay off work. But he did fly. He chose to fly, and nobody could do anything about it. But I do think that this calls into question the wider introspection of pilots, or the plane crew's mental stability issues. You know, you're right in that sense.
Well, I think that will follow, other reforms and changes to be sure this can't happen again, because what was made clear here is that one suicidal person could kill everyone on that plane in a matter of minutes without a whole lot of difficulty, and so now we know the implications of having a suicidal pilot at the controls.
Yeah, and
so,
actually,
what I heard was that Germanwings, and that is Lufthansa, had already started negotiating settlements with the families of the 150 fatalities. Has there been any news about that? I think they offered them a baseline of 50,000 euros per capita, which is more like $65,000. Has there been more discussion of that in the newspaper?
Well, they have cleared around 200 or so million euros for the compensation packages. But I think many of the relatives can also sue Lufthansa if they know that, the links can be established between the pilot's condition and Lufthansa, and also the various technical discrepancies. So I think Lufthansa is in for a big fight over the legality issues, and the compensation packages.
It's too bad, because Lufthansa has been a very good airline for a long time.
Excellent.
How about you, Gauri? Are you going to worry about flying?
I have been worried about flying myself. Thankfully, I'm grounded for some time, so I'm not going off into the air anytime soon. But I really get scared now. It's the turbulence or whatever. It's really scary. It's unnerving.
Really? If it isn't one thing, it's another.
Everything seems to be going down in Europe somehow. I don't know. There's something wrong across here. I think the stars have crisscrossed or something, but there's one thing after another, Somewhere you feel like you're going to get killed or something if you step out now.
It's almost time to come back to Hawaii, Gauri.
I know. I want to come back to paradise.
Well, on that point, on things devolving in Europe, we haven't heard too much more about Ukraine, and we haven't heard too much more about anti-Semitism. Has there been anything you've heard?
No, it's been calm in that sense, and nothing's been moving on the Ukrainian front, thankfully, or on the anti-Semitism front. But there is acknowledgement that there are growing attacks related to anti-Semitism. That is true. I read most of the news, and they do speak about it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's, a kind of picture that Netanyahu has been painting. Ukraine, again, quiet, but Putin has sparked a bit of tension again by having agreed to recognition of Palestine, and that's the main news, but nothing else. But there's one bit of news which might surprise everybody, your listeners especially, and that concerns Greece. And the news is that Greece's finance minister Varoufakis says that if the deal doesn't come through with the euro and the EU troika, Greece might use Bitcoin as their new currency.
No kidding.
Yeah. And he was serious about it, And that was my highlight of the week.
Really, it is. Technology, uber alles.
Yeah, and yeah, because like leaders are losing patience, about Greece, and they don't want them in the euro anymore. Almost, they just don't dare say it, and I think that's where it's all headed, a Grexit, as they call it.
Well, that is definitely one to watch. So Gauri, I hope we can get together another couple of weeks and check back with you. Hopefully nothing bad will have happened, but we can follow up on all these threads and feel that we know a little about what's going on the continent. Thank you so much, Gauri Khandekar of FRIDE in Brussels, joins us by Skype. Here on Midnight in Europe, we're talking about tough analysis of the Iranian nuclear deal and other things. Thank you so much, Gauri, as always.
Thank you so much for having me, and happy holidays to all your listeners and yourself.
Thank you so much, and to you. Aloha.